Tonight we're in Leeds, and welcome to Question Time. And with me here on our panel, the newly elected Respect MP George Galloway, victor of the Bradford West by-election, the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, the co-chairman of the Conservative Party, Sayeeda, the President of the Liberal Democrats, Tim Farron, and the Times columnist, David Aaronovitch. Thank you very much. Now, our first question tonight from Peter Stevens, please.
Should we now take control of our justice system in the light of the farcical deportation of Abu Qatada?
Should we take control of our justice system? Yvette Cooper.
I think this has been farcical this week. It's been completely chaotic. I think look, we all want to see Abu Qatada deported to Jordan as soon as possible, within the rule of law, but as soon as possible, and I think he should be kept in custody in the meantime. I think that's what everybody wants to see. There have been too many delays, I think delays in the British courts and also delays in the European courts, and they should be reformed in order to speed up the process. But I think the problems we've seen this week was, it seems to be a complete shambles of the Home Secretary's making, and they seem to have got a basic deadline wrong about the timing for appeals to the European Court. The Home Secretary said it was Monday, the European Court said it was Tuesday. Why did nobody ring up to just get the basic facts right? I simply don't understand it. And as a result of that, we could now have Abu Qatada able to delay the deportation even further. We could have him more likely to be released back onto our streets, and even having the chance to sue the British government as a result. I think that is chaotic, utterly irresponsible. I think the Home Secretary needs to provide some answers pretty urgently, and she also needs to get a grip of this shambles and sort it all out.
Okay. Sayeeda.
Yes, Peter, we do need reform, because we've been trying to deport this man since 2001. For 9 years, Yvette's government tried, and for the last 2 years, we've been trying. So to try and make party politics out of this, I think, is slightly disingenuous. The delay has been because the European Court of Human Rights has a backlog of about 150,000 cases. The purpose for which that court was set up is not the purpose in which it has been operating. And interestingly, today there has been a conference taking place in Brighton in which we have used our chairmanship of the Council of Europe to get the other member states of the Council of Europe to agree some changes. One, for them to accept that the European Court of Human Rights has a kind of a subsidiary element. So there's the element of subsidiarity. What that basically means is that our courts will have the final say on how we protect the human rights of our population.
And coming to the point about this week, has it been a shambles over this deadline,
well,
as Yvette Cooper says?
I think the thing that we won't agree on, probably on this panel, is whether or not the Home Office lawyers are right, or whether the lawyers at the European Court of... or whether Abu Qatada's lawyers are right.
Why didn't she wait a day, as many people have said, if it's just a matter of a day?
Well, interestingly, on Monday, Yvette was saying, you're taking too long, and on Tuesday she was saying, you've gone too fast. So we couldn't really have pleased them. But
But you could have pleased other people, maybe, if you'd waited a day, because you'd have been able to deport him.
I think what would please everybody in this country is if we could remove him, and remove him as quickly as possible. Right. It took the last government 9 years, and they didn't achieve it. We've been at it for 2 years. I'm confident we will remove him fairly soon.
David Aaronovitch.
There's a wonderfully comic aspect to this, and actually the comic aspect goes two ways, because had we been 2 years ago, we can imagine that Yvette Cooper, as the Home Secretary, having exactly the same problem, and Sayeeda Warsi saying about her what Yvette Cooper has just said about Theresa May, and it would have been completely... In other words, forget about the shambles. All this sort of kind of stuff is always a shambles. Let's look at the issue itself. We do have mostly control over our own justice system, But the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, was set up for very good reasons. It's one of these classic ideas of a really good idea that everybody thought was a good idea at the time that has some problems surrounding it now. And it is an absurdity, and this is the part of the problem which I think is true. It is an absurdity that somebody like Qatada, who is under no threat at all if he goes back to Jordan, we've already got the assurances from the Jordanian government that he isn't, and so on, cannot be deported from this country, given his record and given what we know about him, given what we've been able to show, successive governments have been able to show the courts. And so, Sayeeda Warsi is absolutely right in this instance. It shows the need for a reform of the ECHR and changes to the ECHR so that these things can be made more easily. But don't think it's going to be simple doing it, because the problem with that is that if we find it easy to go against what the European Court of Human Rights says, there are people with much worse human rights records around Europe who would like to be able to do the same thing. These things are complicated, they're not simple.
Surely this is a problem for liberalism, and how long we'll continue to tolerate the intolerant in this country.
Okay. And the man up there in the fourth row, 1, 2, 3, 5th row, you, sir. The spectacles on, yes?
We recently saw that Italy deported a man back to Algeria, I believe it was, despite an ECHR ruling, and all that happened to the Italian government was a €21,500 fine. So considering the fact that the British government does want to get rid of him, why don't they just do that?
George Galloway.
Well, the British government has, in the past, been ready to assist the United States in rendering people, one of whom is now suing the former Foreign Secretary Jack Straw because the British government returned him to the torture tables of Colonel Gaddafi. This was at the time of the kiss-in between Mr. Blair and the Colonel. And I'm sure that Colonel Gaddafi gave the kind of assurances that David Aaronovitch, rather touchingly, is ready to accept from the Jordanians. In fact, every Arab government engages in torture, and every trial in an Arab court in any country is contaminated by this looming spectre of torture. That's why the European Court wants to be very clear that the assurances that David is ready to accept are worth the paper that they're written on. Now, I ran into, in a motorway service station just the other night, some of the acolytes of this Abu Qatada, Anjem Chowdhury and his crowd. And their low malevolence is indeed a shadow over the country. But the presence of these people here is not a reason for us to act like a rogue state. Because if we act like a rogue state, well, for a start, we'll have to stop lecturing other people as rogue states. We have to follow the rule of law. Now, it's clear from Yvette Cooper's sterling performance in the House of Commons today that not only is the Home Office not fit for purpose, but Theresa May is not fit for the job of Home Secretary, and she should be sacked or resign.
Tim Farron, I saw Theresa May say she takes responsibility for the decision that has been taken. Does that mean she would resign if it turns out to have been the wrong decision?
I have no idea.
You think she should?
But I take the view that, I mean, there's an Olympic standard to screw up here at some point, whether it's with the European Court or whether it's with Theresa May or her officials. What I am absolutely certain of, though, is that Abu Qatada should be deported. He should be on a plane as quickly as possible, but that the rule of law should be applied. If governments can't abide by the rule of law, why should anybody else? And I was really impressed by Prime Minister Stoltenberg of Norway's comments recently. We've seen the Breivik trial this week, which is just staggering on many, many levels. And Stoltenberg said that you deal with terrorism, you deal with threats to your freedom and democracy by having more democracy, more freedom and more openness. And you deal with people like Abu Qatada, who are a threat to our country, who do want to undermine our democracy, not by closing up and behaving like he would, but by being more democratic and abiding by the rule of law.
Okay. Who's the man up there? Yes, sir. I'll take a couple more points, then we'll go on to another question. Yes, sir.
We mustn't be a rogue state, and we must have more democracy, but when virtually every elected person we have wants to get rid of this man, and we're prevented by unelected people in Strasbourg, it does call into question things about our sovereignty, and that's a difficult issue thrown into the midst of all of this, which has to be addressed.
But Sayeeda Warsi, sorry.
Yeah,
briefly, Sayeeda.
Yeah, the discussions that are taking place today are all about that, about saying that ultimately it should be our courts who are the final courts who decide on the human rights of our citizens. And the only time that the European Court of Human Rights should get involved is where there is a substantial issue
but this
of interpretation.
This should is one thing. Is it going to happen?
It will happen. There has been agreement now between 47 member states. That agreement has been reached today, and we think that the implementation will take place by 2013. So this has been a huge step forward, and this has been leadership by the Prime Minister and this government saying, we have chairmanship of the European Council, let's use it and let's do something that's good for our nation.
There's a clear issue of inconsistencies here, though. I mean, you talk about sovereignty, it's a fair point. But why is it this government, or indeed governments of any colour, are so quick to bow to our relationship with the United States? There's a young lad from Yorkshire, Richard O'Dwyer, who's been extradited without a question for effectively file sharing, whilst Abu Qatada gets all this treatment.
Do you want to... You serve the Jack Straw. Do you want to reply to the point that George Galloway made about Jack Straw?
Well, I mean, I don't know the details of this.
Neither does he. He's forgotten.
Well,
no, I do.
hang on. I think
Tony Blair's forgotten too.
But George, I do, and you're wrong. There was no question of him being put on a
Why is he
plane,
being sued?
as you were suggesting.
Why is he being sued?
There was no question, because the security services told the CIA where he was.
They collaborated in the rendition of someone to Gaddafi's torture table. Look, I know you like to defend Mr. Blair, but surely even this is indefensible, even by you.
OK, they collaborated with the rendition of somebody...
That's all I said.
...who was then... No, with somebody who was an al-Qaeda supporter, and he was, in 2005, at that point.
And we rendered them to Gaddafi.
And it is always interesting, George, that you never understand the problems that government faced at those times.
Oh, you understand
when dealing with...
well. I thought you were a journalist.
I think maybe I do.
Are you a journalist or a servant of the Blairs?
I tell you what I am. I am a critic of everybody who deserves to be criticised. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about you earlier was you talked about the Arab governments and the Jordanian government when you have just got down from the business of licking the backside of Bashar al-Assad.
No. Listen. Syria is lucky.
All right, I'll give you a chance, George. Hold on, let him finish the point, and then George...
Well, Syria is quite a long to have Bashar al-Assad as her president. You said that, didn't you?
Let me tell the audience something they possibly don't know. When I first met Aaronovitch, he was a communist, a Marxist-Leninist, licking the backside of Lenin and Stalin. He then worked for Tony Blair, and now he works for Rupert Murdoch. So I'm not sure that company and the company people keep is your strong suit.
Have I ever gone up to a dictator and said, you are a wonderful man? Have I ever saluted the indefatigability of a mass murderer?
The Soviet Union. The Soviet Union.
Right.
Were you a communist? Were you a leading communist?
Right. I was a communist, but you were still to the left of me, George.
No, I've never been to the left.
All right. We'll go on...
I was in the Labour Party,
all right,
he was in the Communist Party.
We'll go on to another question, and no doubt there'll be more of this as we go through the evening. If you want to join the debate, if you want to Twitter us, remember our hashtag BBCQT. Text us 83981, push the red button to see what others are saying. And I'll take a question now from Jack Hurley, please.
Was the Bradford Spring just a spot of unseasonable political weather or a sign of wider climate change?
Was the Bradford Spring, which was, of course, George Galloway's description of his victory in Bradford, a spot of unseasonable political weather or climate change? Sayeeda Warsi.
You know, I think, first of all, we have to accept that over 18,000 people, Jack, came out and voted for George Galloway, and none of the political parties should begrudge him that. So congratulations for winning Bradford West. I think it's only right that when the electorate come out and vote for somebody, and if somebody can inspire them to come out and vote for him or her in such numbers, then that, in a way, is democracy working. Of course, we would have loved to have won that seat rather than you. But what I think was happening in Bradford West was the people of Bradford saying that for decades we have had Labour as our Member of Parliament. We have been ruled predominantly by a Labour council, and really nothing's got better. And it was really a lash out really at the Labour Party to say, well, you can't take us for granted anymore.
Yvette Cooper.
Well, I think just on that last point, it's not been predominantly a Labour council over the last few years. The Labour has, in the last couple of years, literally, but before that, in fact, there's been Conservative and also, you know, Conservatives working.
But how long have you held that
so
seat for?
I think, look, I mean, let's go back
to
the question, because I think this was a bad result for us. Of course, it was, you know, it was obviously deeply disappointing for Labour as well. We've got a lot of work to do, and we know that in Bradford, and we will do that. We lost the seat to Respect in Tower Hamlets in 2005. We did a lot of work there to win votes back and to win trust back, and that was successful. And so we have, I think Labour has won votes back in Tower Hamlets. We have to do that again now in Bradford. We have to recognise, I mean, I said before, I think we didn't do enough to engage with young voters in the Asian community in Bradford, but also, I think, Muslim women in Bradford as well. And we have to do a lot more than that. But I think we also have to recognise that, you know, only 4 out of 10 voters voted for any of the major parties. And so, you know, for Sayeeda to try and make this a sort of party political thing for the Labour Party, it's true, it was disappointing for us because we wanted to win Bradford West and we want to do so again. But for the Conservatives, this was a target seat at the last election and their vote was just completely decimated. So it is a challenge to all of the parties. Certainly the parties in government saw their votes collapse. Those votes didn't come to Labour. We know that, you know, the first step is actually just showing what a nightmare I think that this government is for Bradford, for the whole of Yorkshire, and the damage that it is doing. But that is not enough to win back votes for Labour. We've also got
what's
to do
it
a lot
say
more.
about Labour that it loses its majority to George Galloway and he gets a majority of 10,000 votes and your vote goes down by nearly a quarter, 20%?
Yeah,
what's it say about Labour? I mean, you talk about it as a tactician, we've got to do better. Is there something more fundamental?
Well, that's why I think you know, that, I mean, Ed Miliband's already, you know, been back to Bradford to talk to people, to listen to people about what the concerns were that were raised. And, you know, we did do this. Look, you know, we have been through this before in Tower Hamlets, and, you know, we were challenged there, and we had to work again, just as we will have to do in Bradford. So there are some local factors. There are also some wider factors, I think, about politics generally, and about people's frustration, about politics, about people wanting to see change, about people seeing, you know, terrible things happening as a result of the economic problems and so on, and they want to see something different happen. They have to show people that actually politics can make a difference, the Labour Party can make a difference, and that means setting out alternatives
David
as well.
Aaronovitch, what do you attribute it to?
Well, George Galloway's essentially did at Bradford what the Liberal Democrats have been doing for years, but now they're in government they can't. So I suppose he's a kind of modern Liberal Democrat.
What's that?
What is it? Which is testing the support for the two major parties at a by-election and discovering that an awful lot of people don't like them at the time of that by-election. Actually, voter support for the two main parties has been falling over the years since the 1950s, and that's a fact. And I've often thought, I was at the Wyre Forest in 2001 when the Dr Taylor won the independence poll. I felt at that election that quite often, if a halfway credible candidate could come along on one of these seats, then often they would pick up the votes. And then there are the particular ways in which George Galloway appealed to the voters of Bradford, which was an additional element in that
Which were what?
Well, George knows what it is. I mean, when you've got a campaign leaflet that goes out saying God knows who is a Muslim and he knows who is not, instinctively so do you, signed George Galloway, and you think to yourself, how does George know that God knows who is a Muslim? Did God appear to you, George, in tablets of stone? Was it written in fiery words on a stone wall, or was it the burning bush this time? Well,
Stalin was your God. God is my God. There's only one God, I believe. You don't. We'll both soon find out. The Bradford Bulls have won 4 games in a row since I was elected, and they even beat the Leeds Rhinos, and I was there. Bradford City Football Club even won last Saturday, and that's a very rare event. So we have changed, to pick up the point of the questioner, the political weather in Bradford.
How did Blackburn do?
Yvette, we're coming to Blackburn next, don't worry about that.
Well, as long as you know you're there.
Yvette talked for quite a long time about what the lessons for Labour were, but she didn't actually say anything. Let me shortcut this for her. The reasons that Labour voters do not find New Labour credible is because they caused a succession of wars in which more than 1 million people died, supported by Aaronovitch, by Yvette Cooper, and by the leadership of New Labour, because all three of the major parties support the war in Afghanistan. All three of the major parties support austerity, as they describe it, which means poor people paying the price for the crimes and the mistakes of rich people and powerful people in running the economy and the government. Most Labour voters say no to all those propositions. And until Labour becomes Labour again, until they can find the vocabulary and express the values that made Labour great, which changed this country, that's why I was in it for 36 years when Aaronovitch was a communist. I was in it for 36 years because I believed in Labour. And I want to persuade people to be able to believe in Labour again.
All right.
There'll have to be Labour for that to happen.
OK, there are a lot of people with their hands up. Do you want briefly just to answer that point?
Simply to say that Respect prosecuted those arguments in Tower Hamlets in 2010, and they lost. And Labour won those constituencies by by talking about actually the things I think that matter to people, which is the fact that people are losing their jobs, the fact that we shouldn't have a plan which involves taking more from the children than it does from the banks.
Well, was it Afghanistan that turned the corner for him? Afghanistan and Iraq and the decision on war.
People are still do still have strong views about this, and I think it's...
Is that why you think he won, which is what, in effect, he's claiming?
I think that Respect have spent a lot of time campaigning on those issues. Actually, I think that...
Well, we know that. The question is, was that the turning point? Was that the decisive...
Why don't you condemn the war? You'll do yourself a lot of good. Look into that camera and say, I condemn the invasion of Iraq. I condemn the invasion of Afghanistan. Why don't you say it?
Well, hang on, George. No, you can do all of the sort of predictable rhetoric about wars, and I could do predictable rhetoric back again and talk about Arab dictators and so on. And I don't think any of that gets us anywhere. There are serious issues.
Why don't you condemn Iraq then? Just Iraq. Condemn it. Go on.
My view is that we were wrong about Iraq.
That's not the same thing. We were wrong about Iraq. Like you were wrong about how you parked your car. 1 million people died.
George, I listened to you.
George,
I listened to you. I think that in Afghanistan it is right that we are part of a mission of 40 different countries preventing Afghanistan deteriorating into being a terror haven.
Well,
but I also think the people of Bradford, the people of Leeds, the people of Tower Hamlets, the people right across the country actually want to know what Respect, what Labour, what the Conservatives will do about their jobs, about their living standards, about the fact that they feel really squeezed at the moment and that they want people to stand up for them.
Okay.
We need to stand up for them. We didn't do enough to do that in Bradford in that particular election, but we will do so, and we are doing so at the moment across the country.
Tim, I'm going to come to you now. Just one or two members of the audience, and I'll come to you. The woman there on the right.
I think you're not doing enough to stand up for people every single day, Yvette, and that's the problem. This was not a protest vote. What this was about, in my experience as a public sector worker and as a public sector trade unionist, was people rejecting the austerity and the cuts agenda, fast cuts, slow cuts. We don't want them. We want no cuts. And that's what people voted for, and that's why people voted for George Galloway. And I'd like to say one more thing. I hope that when it comes to May the 3rd and people get the chance to vote, then we won't be talking about making Bradford British, we'll be talking about making Britain Bradfordian.
Tim Farron.
Back to Jack's original question, it was a staggering result. I spent just an evening there on the Tuesday beforehand, and I saw something.
Shouldn't you have gone a bit more? Because you lost your deposit.
I'm sure if I'd been even more, we'd have done even worse.
You only went for one evening. But hang on a second. You went for one evening as president of the party. Is that all?
I went for. It was a long evening, and as I said, and I found. I think I met all of our voters. But what I will say, just hats off to George and his team. I don't buy a lot of the reasons and the explanations as to why George won. I didn't see much comment on austerity on any of those leaflets, I have to say. It was a foreign affairs election, by and large. But it was a brilliant campaign, and it was something that he deserves credit for. And it was exciting in British politics at a time like this to see a different campaign that motivated people. Why did it happen? Well, for the last 40 or 50 years, people have been losing their allegiance, their loyalty to the main political parties. And that is good. It means politicians have actually got to work harder for your vote. It's not comfortable for politicians, but it's good for you. I think it is bad news for all the three main parties, without a shadow of a doubt, but I think what it does show us, what George shows us, and what I think Alex Salmond shows us north of the border, that at a time like this, when perhaps some people will want to vote against the government parties, if you also give them the chance to vote against Labour too, they'll bite your hand off.
OK. Let's go to the man there in blue up there on the gangway. Yes.
It's directed at George. Is it true that in the press there was 100 to 1 against you winning that seat?
200 to 1.
People
200 to 1, and somebody bet £1,000
people put money on that bet. So you were obviously going to get all the people that had backed at the bookies. And the other thing was, is it true that you canvassed within the mosques in Bradford?
Absolutely. I canvassed within the mosques, within the churches, amongst white people, amongst black people.
All right.
I canvassed for every vote.
OK, and you won. We heard that bit.
And I won.
The man in the second row there,
I think by-elections are totally different to the general election, and I don't think George will be grinning like the cat that got the cream by the time the general election comes.
OK. And the woman next to you.
The only invasion that I am decrying is the invasion of George Galloway into a city he knows nothing about, that's got enough problems without him in it.
Do you want to enlarge on that, or is that...
I feel like he's a yes, yes, yes politician. He's not going to keep any of his promises, and it's not going to be hard for Labour to re-win that seat again, because he's going to let everybody down.
All right. And the man up there, on the gangway up there, in the grey shirt, yes.
I can see that you've got into Bradford, George, and it's got you back into government, but what are you going to do for Bradford? There's a hole in the ground which used to be a big plan for a shopping centre. There's a big pond that they spent a lot of money on, and one of the major buildings in Bradford is crumbling. They've been vacuum wrapped. What are you going to do to Bradford to make yourself stay there?
Well, look at the Telegraph and Argus since I was elected, and you'll see page after page after page of local issues. The one point that I agreed with that Yvette Cooper made was that actually the Tories are responsible for the hole in the ground. It was them that dug it. The Tories were in power in Bradford City Council until the last couple of years. But two cheeks of the same backside, nothing has changed in Bradford. There's mass unemployment. Youth unemployment has tripled in a year and risen by 40% in 12 weeks. The poverty that stalks Bradford West is a disgrace to both of these major parties, and that's why we were elected.
I think we can leave Bradford now, because we established that you've won, and we don't want to run the campaign all over again.
All right.
Thank you. I think we'll move on to another question. From Ryan McDonagh, please.
Is it fair the parents of truant children should have fines taken directly from their child benefit?
Is it fair parents of truant children should have fines directly taken from the child benefit? This is the proposal of the government's advisor, that this is how fines should be recovered, straight from child benefit. Tim Farron, is this a coalition policy you approve of?
Definitely not. In fact, the government, I believe, have turned down Charlie Taylor's that aspect of Charlie Taylor's report. It's absolutely right that the government should accept those parts of the report that make a difference, but, you know, when all said and done, there is a huge coincidence between poverty, high levels of poverty, and high levels of truancy in this country. If you deal with it by taking benefit money off the parents of children who play truant, you will just make the situation absolutely worse. And so the government is doing one thing which is actually already helping to tackle truancy, and that is the pupil premium, making sure those kids from the poorest backgrounds, those schools, get the most money. That helps with attainment, it helps with attendance. But the notion that you should punish by taking more money off some of the poorest parents in the country to deal with truancy is counterproductive and morally abhorrent.
So, is it consultation, or has it been turned down?
I understand that at this stage it's something that has been put forward, and as far as I'm aware, it's up for consultation. But, you know, I'll stand corrected. Tim may know something that I don't know.
But do you know something she doesn't know?
It's not been fully accepted. I think the government has accepted...
Well, hang on a second. It's put forward as a proposal. You said it's been turned down.
The government has turned down expressly those aspects that relate to fining the parents of truanting children.
Is that right?
I'm not sure about that. Maybe we.
You're only co-chairman of the party.
I'm sure, yeah, but it's not a conservative. It's not a conservative-only government. We do have two parties in this government.
Home Office
They're doing the subs.
Look, what I do think. Look, every child that doesn't go to school and spends days or hours out of school is destroying their future, and therefore we have to do two things. First of all, we have to inspire.
Take money off them.
First of all, we have to inspire kids, and we have to have the kind of schools that kids want to go to. And if you look at the academy programme, which has now been extended by hundreds of schools, which are basically schools where the head teacher has the freedom to be able to set the uniform, set the day, set the kind of parameters of the kind of school and the feel that that school has, we're finding that actually attendances in academies is a lot higher than schools that don't become academies. What we've also seen is an emergence of free schools, and in fact you've got one in your constituency in Bradford West, where in one of the most deprived communities a free school has been set up, which is being paid for by the state, and the kind of education those kids are getting are the kind of education that actually most other people would only
we
go
get the point.
and pay for.
We get the point. Hang on. Are you in favour of the parents of truanting children, A, being fined, and B, if they're not paying the fines, having it deducted from child benefit?
No, but what I am in favour of is relinking the concept of responsibility between child and parent.
You're not in favour of fines,
right. I do not think it is right that parents can simply say, look, nothing to do with me, I can't control them,
Can you
I'm
answer
not
the
going to bring
question?
them
Are
to
you in
school.
favour of fines on parents whose children truant?
I think we've already got a system where...
We have. Are you in favour of it?
Well, I am in favour of parents having to take responsibility, whether that is financial responsibility or responsibility to say that they need to get their kids to school. Look,
right.
we cannot have
hold on.
a
I think I've got the
situation-
answer there. The man in blue there, and I come to you, Yvette Cooper, because this was a Labour measure, wasn't it? Yes.
I think if parents want to avoid fines for their kids truanting, they should raise the children properly and get them sent to school.
Yvette Cooper, do you approve of fines on parents of children who truant?
I think it's one option in certain circumstances, but there have to be safeguards in place. You've got to get children into school, because if they play truancy, if they're not in school, that actually will harm them for the rest of their lives. The disadvantages that they will face will just follow them decade after decade. So I do think we should take every action we can to get children back into school. That may involve support, that may involve all kinds of help for the family as well as for that child. It may, in certain circumstances, where parents are refusing to take any responsibility for their children or refusing to do the things that you need parents to do as well, also involve having court systems and having fines. I think the problem with this issue of focusing on child benefit is I think that's in danger of being very difficult and unworkable, and there was no safeguards in place in the way that it was being proposed, no safeguards if in fact the parent was actually doing everything they possibly could or was already suffering and living in poverty and struggling as well. In fact, actually what the government is doing is they're just hitting child benefit for everyone. They're cutting the value of everybody's child benefit, they're cutting the value of tax credit, whether people are doing the right thing as parents or not. Actually, all the children and all the families are losing out.
OK. You sit in the front row.
Yes, I think the policy of taking money away from parents of truanting children is just a lazy policy. It's simplistic and populist. There are many reasons why children might truant. Including bullying and many other reasons, and I think it's a much more complex problem than is being appreciated. It can't be solved by this measure. You've got to look at what kind of education is being provided, and that at the moment, the current trend is to narrow that to a more academic education, and more young people are going to find that that sort of schooling does not suit them, and they're not going to turn up.
OK. And you sat there.
I find it really disappointing that people from, let's say, disadvantaged backgrounds, having experienced the lack of education themselves, don't encourage their own children to get that education, which is the next step up to a better career.
Do you think that the fines that were introduced 8 years ago by a Labour government, do you think they're the right approach?
I think they're an approach. I don't think there is one particular policy that's going to solve everything.
OK.
But, as I'm sure Yvette Cooper knows from the last years of Labour, that they must have tried this in their own education secretaries and failed miserably. And I'm sure under the last Conservative governments, they failed miserably as well.
Right.
I'm told that absenteeism isn't as bad as it used to be, so that's always a good thing. But I think you need a comprehensive array of policies rather than just focusing on one thing.
George Galloway.
Well, the Tories are so strongly in favour of children going to school that they've cut the EMA, the Education Maintenance Allowance, that would have allowed working-class children and poor children to stay on at school and have some small amount of income to help them. They're so in favour of school that they asked the House of Commons this week to celebrate the latest unemployment figures, even though those unemployment figures showed 1 million young people out, because that's one of the reasons why the schools and truancy are as they are, because children cannot see the benefit of sticking in at school, because unemployment for more than 1 million of them is what comes after school. But the idea that a family is so dysfunctional that the parent can no longer control their child will be helped by taking their ever-shrinking child benefit away is something that only Mr Blair or Mr Cameron could have come up with, and both of them did.
Okay. The woman there on the right.
When I was at school about 100 years ago, there was a board man that used to, if you didn't go to school, within minutes the board man was knocking on your door and would take you there. So that might be an alternative to reinstate that profession.
Did that happen to you?
No.
David Aaronovitch.
I disagree with Tim about this in one major way. This is not a moral issue at all. This is an issue about what works. The gentleman there was quite right. Truancy is not increased. It's actually stabilised and has been at a kind of stable level. But the problem that's being identified here is that there is a core truancy which is incredibly difficult to get at. It's very, very hard to reach. It's very difficult to persuade people. Now, the question we've got to ask ourselves is this. Do we think that by society effectively saying we think so lowly of the behaviour of not getting your children to school that we are prepared, in a sense, to stigmatise it and make you suffer financial hardship because of it? Now, it has to be said that during the course of the 60s and 70s, crime rates went up in Britain and America, partially because we had given the message out that we must be much more understanding, and it's quite all right to rebel, and it's quite all right to be criminal. This may be one major reason why they did. We spent a lot of time trying after that to get the message over that actually crime wasn't okay. We went in for zero tolerance policies and so on. We said that we weren't going to tolerate crime even at low levels. We started talking about antisocial behaviour. Gradually, crime came down, and most serious crime has come down. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we think this is likely to work? That's the only question that really matters. It's not a moral question. It's a question of whether or not you will end up helping those children or harming them by taking that particular action. And frankly, I'd like to see the evidence on it, because I don't know.
OK. Let's go on. Let's return to the big event of the last month. And Wendy Fletcher, a question, please.
Is the budget proving to be omni-shambolic?
Omni-shambolic, the quote from the thick of it. Pasties, granny taxes, churches, caravans, charity and all the rest of it. Seems to raise its head every day in the House of Commons. Tim, do you think it's omni-shambolic, this budget, or do you think George Osborne, your Chancellor, brilliantly conducted and thought through every measure that was put to the House of Commons?
Well put. I mean, I think the government is so committed to fairness that they are methodically and systematically making sure that we offend absolutely everybody. But, you know, we've run out of easy options, let's be honest. The big ticket item in the budget was, of course, the lifting of 23 million people's income tax, removing the income tax for the 2 million lowest paid people and cutting the income tax to 23 million next lowest paid people. That was by far the most expensive part of the budget, well trailed in advance, lost during, and now we're talking about all sorts of smaller things. The reality is these are all difficult things. We did the easy stuff early on. I mean, whether you blame Labour or the banks or whoever, I don't really care. This government inherited an absolute basket case and had to take tough decisions. We did the easy stuff early on. £15 billion Labour were going to waste on ID cards. We scrapped that. Easy stuff done straight away. Now, there is no easy stuff left. And we're going to make difficult and sometimes very unpopular decisions. But the bottom line is that the budget was redistributive from the rich to the poor, and that's the big news for as I'm concerned. It was. Oh, clearly it was.
Yvette Cooper.
No, well, this is just rubbish. I mean, you know, you've got a budget in which pensioners are being asked to pay hundreds of pounds more, whilst millionaires are being able to pay £40,000 a year less. How can that be redistributive from rich to poor? It's going the other way around. It's taking money away from the poor and giving it back to the rich.
If it was true, I'd be with you, Yvette.
This idea that, you know, Tim is trying to claim credit for a pension rise that is simply because pensions are going up in line with inflation.
Well, you never
and
did it.
Inflation is high.
You never did it.
Pensions would have gone up in this, like this, regardless. The government has done nothing to push up pensions. In fact, what they have done is taken money away. The so-called granny tax is taking money away from pensioners in order to give it to the richest people in the country. Clearly, the donors to the Conservative Party have been having the kitchen suppers with David Cameron and George Osborne. And the shocking thing about what Tim is doing is that the Liberal Democrats are signing up to every single word of it. It is shocking what they are doing.
If it was true, I'd be with you. But it's not true. The rich are going to be paying 5 times more as a result than they lose or they gain from the 50p rate going, something I wasn't happy about anyway. And that is a seriously redistributive budget. This is the biggest single increase in the state pension in cash terms.
Tim, you
since
are kidding yourself.
I'm not. 5.2% increase. This is
the
biggest pension rise since Lloyd George introduced.
What do you say to the point that...
What do you say to the point? Pensioners will not get... Sorry, with the millionaires will not get £40,000 back as a result of this budget? Do you think that's untrue?
The 50p rate going down to 45 is something I do not agree with. And when all said and done, it was the price that George Osborne exacted for the Liberal Democrats getting 23 million poorer paid people out of paying the income tax.
But the people on the
poorest
income of all
win.
are losing most. Part-time workers on the minimum wage are having to pay thousands of pounds more because they're not even on enough to pay tax, but you're taking away their tax credits. It is shocking and disgraceful what the Liberal Democrats have signed up to.
I have enough form on this. I have enough form on this, shall we say, when it comes to sometimes not following the government line. If that was true, I would agree with you. It's clearly patently...
David Aaronovitch.
This is so kind of replete with irony. Was it a shambles? Yes. The budget was a shambles. It was a shambles. Actually, Tim has effectively said it was a shambles, because what he said is, look, there was some really good stuff there, but nobody noticed it because of all the other stuff that George Osborne insisted sticking in there. That is almost a definition in terms of the thick of it, and Malcolm Tucker, the kind of leading Alistair Campbell-type figure, of a shambles. This is how not to do it. And then Tim has to say, well, you know, there were some really good bits, and all the good bits were Liberal Democrat bits, and all the bad bits were the Tory bits.
That's right, yeah.
Essentially, which is essentially his opinion. Then Yvette says that the millionaires benefited when, at the moment, Labour is incredibly worried about exactly the self-same millionaires having to pay tax on their charitable donations, and it's actually a toss-up as to which of you, Baroness Warsi or you, Yvette, is toughest at any one time on the millionaires and so on. And at the same time, the granny tax probably was the one measure in the budget that probably had to be taken, because the big problem we don't have in this country is richer pensioners. That is not our problem. Our problem, long-term, is poorer teenagers and poorer young people. That's the problem that's coming up at us. That's the problem the budgets have to deal with, and in that sense, the government was right. Now, to get a whole lot of things right, and then to throw it away in the 50p tax rate decrease, so that you look like the rich person's party, and you, by association, look like the rich person's party's adjunct and lieutenant, etc., that is my definition of a shambles.
Sayeeda Warsi. On that point, first of all, the cut from 50 to 45%.
Well, actually, this isn't a decision that was taken in terms of how we had to give money to the rich or the poor. What I want to see is to take more money from people who earn more money. And the way you do that is by making sure... The way you do that is by making sure that you set your tax at a level which actually attracts people to come into this country, set up their businesses here, create jobs here, and pay their taxes here. Right now, the 50p tax makes us the highest higher rate tax band in the G20. Now, we live in a global world. We can't expect London or the UK to live separate from the rest of the world. When people look at business opportunities, they look at the States, they look at France, they look at Germany, and they look at the UK. And businesses will not come to those places where they feel that we run a high tax economy. And I'm confident that actually by reducing the rate to 45, we will actually gain more investment, more jobs, more opportunities for the future, and therefore more tax for our coffers.
So, why are you against it, very briefly? Why don't you accept your co-partner's
I'm honest
argument?
with you. I mean,
You're not just wrong?
We talked about the... no, I think Sayeeda is wrong on this point. I mean, in the end, it was a coalition budget. There's some stuff that was ours, some stuff that was theirs. I always took the view that, yes, 50p did not raise a vast amount of... Did not raise a vast amount of money. But what it did do is send a signal, didn't it, that the wealthy are supposed to be paying their fair share. Yep. And whilst the Liberal Democrats may well have quintupled the amount of money we get from those people from other sources, nobody knows it, do they?
Tim, you don't...
OK, hold on. The man on the front row here in the green tie, red and green tie. Yeah.
A Yorkshire Regiment tie. There seems to be a coalition on that side of the table between the various people there who say that the default setting is that the rich must be robbed to support the poor. No, and the question is... No, hear me out. The point is, how long can that go on before you have the situation that Baroness Varzi is talking about, where the rich say, whoever they may be, the rich say, I've had enough of this. You cannot have a default setting, is that whenever we need more money, we just dip into the pockets of the rich.
Well, George Galloway.
Well, you don't have to be a pasty-eating granny with a caravan to conclude that this has been a disastrous budget. Few budgets survive the publicity of the day after. But this one has been cataclysmic. It has been omni-shambolic. And we've seen it here. These two people, in case you didn't know, are in the same government together. In fact, they don't agree, apparently, on very much. But Tim, you're a very impressive fellow, much more impressive than Nick Clegg. I don't know why they don't replace him with you. But you're committing electoral suicide, keeping this lot in power with a budget like that. Because the whole country can see this is a government of 23 millionaires out of 29 in the cabinet, people who are so filthy rich that they don't even know their wealth. George Osborne thought that he was not paying the higher rate of tax. If he isn't, he ought to be behind bars, because his income, as can be easily discerned, is upper tax bracket income. This rich man's government is being kept in power by you. If not for you, they'd be out.
That's not true, is
Why
it?
don't you
Not
look
true.
at your own interest? You lost your deposit in Bradford. You're losing your deposit all over the country. You're going to be annihilated at the next general election. Get out of bed, metaphorically speaking, with these people.
George,
do yourselves a favour.
When you lost the last general election, when you were not successful in 2010, there was an election result. I'm sure you watched the rest of it, and the arithmetic left us with two options. One, sit on our hands, let David Cameron go to the country in October, massive Tory majority. Or the other, do an incredibly politically difficult thing, which you are right to say is hard for us, but nevertheless better for the country. This government is surely more green, more liberal, more fair for us being in it than us being out of it. Do I expect us to get any political credit for it? We'll wait and see.
Okay.
But the problem is...
No one's clapping that one.
I know.
Even the things...
Thank you. There you are.
Even the things that the budget was supposed to do, even the things that George Osborne and Nick Clegg all promised they would do, support jobs, support growth, get the economy rolling, none of that has happened either. So all the grand promises they made when this coalition came together, when Tim and Sayeeda, the promises that they were making, it's not being delivered. Instead, what we've got is over 1 million young unemployed, and the economy is stalled at the time the US economy is growing twice as fast.
There is so much hypocrisy.
That is what is the real shame in this budget.
There is so much hypocrisy in the Labour position. Let me just give you two very simple examples. Before the general election, you wanted to put up national insurance, you wanted to put up a jobs tax. You're now asking for a freeze on it. Before the general election, you had a fuel escalator tax in place, which you were going to put in year on year. Now you want to cut it. You are completely hypocritical in the position that you took before the general election and the position that you're taking now. You made a mess of this country and you're now being opportunistic in opposition.
All right. Okay. The man there. You, sir. Yes. You, sir.
Just like to say that the last election which produced the coalition wasn't, in fact, not a strong vote for the Conservatives. It was a damning vote for Labour. And I think if you talk about the Liberal Democrats going into oblivion, so does Labour.
Right, that's okay. And the man there with behind you, who are trying to get in, because you've spoken already. The man behind you, yes.
Okay, and I was thinking about Baroness Warsi. I think that investment's not coming into this country not because of a tax, but because there's no growth in this country. We've still got, you know, a 0.5% income tax with the Bank of England, and inflation is growing. It's not coming down to what the
What did you think of the budget?
I thought it was a shambles again. Yes, I mean, they just haven't got their ideas straight. The economics of austerity isn't going to work. We need to sort of generate growth, increase base interest rates slightly, and get some money into the economy and get some jobs and growth going.
And you on the side there.
The Labour Party proposed a tax on bankers' ridiculous bonuses, which would have created a £2 billion fund to aid getting some of the 1 million young people back into work. Why haven't the government introduced this? And is it more important to please a few very rich bankers or to enable this generation not to be the next lost generation?
OK, thank you. And you, sir?
Do we not think that the reason the growth has not occurred in this country is because of the fear that the crisis in the European Union is going to affect the British economy in the long run
and that's
anyway?
the priority, you think? Yes,
Yeah.
they don't. We'll leave it. We'll go on. We've got 4 or 5 minutes left. We'll go to another question, I think. And this is from Liza Chaco, is it?
Chaco.
Chaco. Liza Chaco.
Is it right for British drivers to participate in the Bahrain Grand Prix when a pro-democracy movement is raging?
This row over whether the Grand Prix on Sunday should take place with the pro-democracy demonstrations going on, and the Indian team apparently today having to take refuge because their car was firebombed on their way back from practice. George Galloway, what do you think?
No, there's blood on the tracks, and anyone who drives over them, anyone who sponsors the teams that are driving over them, will never be forgiven. And the massacre, because it is a massacre, in Bahrain, in proportion to Bahrain's population, which is very small, is bigger than the death rate in any of these Arab revolutions. If it were in Egypt, it would be the equivalent of 12,000 dead people. And yet, the King of Bahrain is coming to Windsor Castle at our expense to take luncheon with the Queen to celebrate her Diamond Jubilee. David Cameron entertained that King in 10 Downing Street, and now Formula One, in the peculiar form of Bernie Ecclestone, the former funder of Mr Blair and New Labour, thinks that it's fitting to run a sporting event through the flames that nearly engulfed the Indian team today, and across tracks that are stained with the blood of people who are asking for a vote, asking to be able to elect their government. The Prime Minister of Bahrain has been the Prime Minister since 1960, before the Beatles. And the Beatles are 40 years gone. He's been the Prime Minister for 52 years, and nobody elected him.
So you want it cancelled? Sayeeda.
Well, the FIA takes the decision about where it should take the Grand Prix. It's not a decision
What's
that's
your
taken
advice?
by the government. We can give advice in relation to the political situation there and in relation to the security situation there, and we've seen challenges around that security situation. But the government can't stop British drivers from taking part in a Grand Prix. That has got to be their decision, just like we can't stop businesses from operating out there, just like we can't stop travellers from travelling out there.
What
We
about
can
the
give
visit
advice.
to Windsor Castle, if it's right, and the relationship with David Cameron?
Well, the decision for the King to attend the Queen's Diamond Jubilee
invited.
Is a decision taken by the royal family.
It's not. You
Of
know
course
that's
it is
not true.
advice. Of course,
The Prime
advice.
Minister advises on
Of course,
these
the
matters.
Prime Minister advises upon that decision. I accept that. But it is a decision that ultimately has to be taken by the royal family. And if it's a decision, if the Queen has decided that on her Diamond Jubilee she would like certain people present at that celebration, then I really think we can stop being kind of mean about it and allow the Queen to have her Diamond Jubilee and allow the
OK, the man in the fourth row there. Yes, you.
If it wasn't for the Formula One, would we be even discussing this now? Also, with the race going ahead, it'll probably get more publicity about what's going on over there than it will without it.
David Aaronovitch.
This is a hideous moment for me because I agree with every word that George Galloway said. Every single word. The Formula One Grand Prix is being used by the Bahraini government as a major signal to the international community and to its own people that everything is all right in Bahrain, when everything is not all right in Bahrain. There are basic denials of democratic rights. There are the imprisonment of human rights campaigners and so on. There is artillery at the moment parked on the Pearl roundabout area where the demonstrations used to take place. The Bahraini government is stopping journalists getting in by using all kinds of strange bureaucratic means in order to cover this, etc. And at the same time, a former head of the Metropolitan Police, John Yates, is acting as a shill for the Bahraini government by issuing a report saying everything's lovely, the water's lovely here, everybody come on. And the least we could do, and politicians could say to the Formula One, look, guys, this would be better not happening, and not only that, but you say it, with regard to the gentleman's point there, say it publicly, say the reason why you're not going, say that this is not a place where we want to race at the moment.
OK. Yvette Cooper. Your Shadow Home Secretary, what would your advice be?
I think, in answer to Liza's question, that it shouldn't go ahead. I don't think British drivers should go. I think the Formula One should not go ahead in Bahrain for exactly the reasons that David and George have talked about, in the fact that you've got violent demonstrations that have been... demonstrations by democratic protesters who have been violently suppressed. And although it should be a matter for the sport to decide rather than for the government, I don't think the government should be taking the final decision. I do think government ministers can express an opinion. I think all of us on this panel can express an opinion, and that opinion should be very clear. This should not go ahead. It would send the wrong signal, and it shouldn't happen.
And Windsor Castle and the Jubilee?
Well, I think the government has diplomatic relations that it has to use, and it has to sort of set out policies in order to put pressure on, on governments. I think they have to be very careful how they handle this. So I think they need to maintain the pressure on the Bahraini regime. I think they need to consider very carefully how they handle that and the way in which they do so.
Tim Farron.
Well, to answer Liza's question, the race should be cancelled because the very fact that the FIA are taking the Formula One race there endorses and legitimises that regime. Many of us were involved in the movement in the 70s and the 80s that helped to end apartheid, which is about boycotting that regime through cultural and sporting boycotts, and it was hugely, hugely powerful in making sure we brought down, between us collectively internationally, that appalling regime. You do not give succour to tyrants by taking a very wealthy roadshow there to make it look as though we somehow endorse them.
All right, we must stop, I'm afraid. Our time's up. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you for that point. Next week, Question Time moves to Romford, a week away from the local elections then, right across the United Kingdom, and, of course, the big battle between Boris and Ken in London. And the week after that, the day of those elections, we'll be in Stratford in East London. If you want to come either to Romford or Stratford and join the audience, just go to our website. Address is there on the screen now, or call us on 0330 123 9988. My thanks to our panellists here, to all of you who came to Leeds to take part. Until next Thursday from Question Time. Good night.
Well, next on BBC One, more debate on deportation, rumblings over the budget and the American presidential election in the spotlight this week.